It is good to be a Hawkeye. That's what a lot of really good football players who have NFL futures have determined for 2024. Good news for Kirk Ferentz and his staff in Hawkeye Nation. Welcome into the Voice of College Football and our Iowa Live show that we present to you each and every Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 where it counts. Corey Brad is here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Of course, we've done this show now 128 times. If you do the math, we're working on about 2.5 years here. We will take you through the off season. Corey, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. It sounds like we're getting real close to getting an announcement on the offensive coordinator hire. So anticipate something there very soon. And boy, Iowa's gotten a lot of really good announcements as it relates to what you said. Guys coming back for extra COVID years or just fifth years. It really is incredible what they've been able to do. And I made the comment yesterday when talking about Nick Jackson's return. You know, and he's able to come back because the NCAA approved a waiver for him to play an extra year. He's got an opportunity to be the NCAA's all-time leading tackler. Think about that. Because of this extra year, he could accomplish that feat. So we'll have to do that. I think he needs like 120 tackles next year or something crazy. So I guess my point is, like, they're getting so many people back. And obviously Cooper's gone, and that's the unfortunate part of this. But they may not have to go to the portal. I mean, they may go to the portal. Obviously, they've shown some interest, obviously, at a quarterback position over the last couple of years. We saw two guys brought in a year ago, and this year they obviously struggled that position with Cade's injury. There was rumors that they were interested in Ty Thompson from Oregon. He quickly committed to Tulane. But my point is, like, they got so many guys back and no scholarships to give out right now, unless more people leave. They've got their roster pretty much situated.
You piqued my interest. I'm a nerd for these kind of things. And so when you say has a shot at becoming the all-time tackler in the history of college football, then boom, I got to go to the stats. 100 plus tackles, of course, 4 consecutive years. And of course, prior to 1972, players could not play as freshmen. So that was a huge factor. And then, of course, the seasons have only been getting longer, with 11 games played for most of my youth, and then 12 games kicked in about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and now 13 and beyond conference championship games in the whole deal. So he just played a 14-game season. So that has certainly helped the modern player accumulate stats. 462 tackles.
What's crazy is, am I right in saying this, Mark, that had he played, if he had been a freshman in 2018, he could have played 4 games in 2018, and this would have been, he'd have been going into his 7th year. Am I right in saying that?
Yes.
Because he got the free COVID year. He would have had the redshirt year in 2018, and he'd have the waiver year because of the Virginia situation. That's insane.
Alan Bowman's the quarterback at Oklahoma State. He's coming back next year for his 7th year.
So what was the situation there? He was obviously 2018, but is that kind of what happened there? He had a, how do you even get 7 years?
Probably. That's probably what it is, would be a freshman or a red shirt plus the COVID year. I don't really know. I know he's played at 3 different schools.
I'm assuming he got a medical red shirt then in a different year, would be my guess. Like he played in a couple of games or a few games and then got a serious injury and then took a medical because he'd be done. I mean, even if the COVID year and that's the thing, this coming year, these are 6th year guys that were freshmen in 2019. I don't know. It just feels like everybody's getting 6th and 7th year. And I don't mind. I mean, guys like Nick Jackson, this is great for Iowa. Don't get me wrong. He's probably the best player they got last year in the transfer portal. So for him and Jay Higgins both to be coming back now, how do they replace somebody like Cooper DeJean? Big question mark. They did play the latter almost half of the season without Cooper DeJean. So, you know, there's that. They're going to be really, really good next year. I mean, preseason, I'm not some national guru like you, Mark, but, you know, based on their numbers this year and what they return, you know, probably a top 5 defense preseason. I don't know why they wouldn't be nationally.
I had a long brainstorming session going back and forth between naming voice of college football, guru of college football. I was really weighing that out.
I think voice of college football is good.
Okay. All right. There is a tight end for Miami who is petitioning the NCAA for a 9th year.
I didn't even know that was possible. So
Yeah, I don't ask me for the particulars, but as soon as you went down that path, I thought, I know there's a tight end for Miami who's going for a 9th year, and I just looked it up. Cam McCormick going for a 9th year. Back to the Hawkeyes. Yes, outside of Cooper DeJean, these are all good decisions for the Hawkeye fans.
yeah, they're 5 over the scholarship limit right now. 5. So they got to trim things down by the time you hit fall camp. Now they got some time to do that, but somebody's going to have to leave. Somebody on scholarship is going to have to leave. So who's that going to be? Well, they got to lose several of them. And it does sound like Quinn Schulte's back, as you put in your headline. He hasn't made an official announcement, but the university basically said as much yesterday on social media. And Nick Jackson is coming back as well. So yeah, there are 5 over the limit. I hate to try to guess it as far as who might leave. I'm guessing that once we hit spring, there'll be some underclassmen that want to get out, just because that's kind of the era that we play college football in today, is just guys leave very early. And, what positions I think running back would be one that I've brought up several times. I just can't imagine a scenario where they retain all these guys. I know Caleb Johnson has said on social media that he's a Hawk, and, it's hard to imagine LaShawn Williams leaving, given the fact that he was probably their best back this year. Jazz Patterson's numbers dwindled, especially in the Citrus Bowl. He didn't play hardly at all, but he has not announced. So, are these guys waiting until spring to see what happens? That's possible. Iowa actually played Terrell Washington Jr. and Kamari Moulton in the Citrus Bowl as well. So basically played 5 guys. They've got a couple of people coming in next year, Brevin Dahl being one. And then they got a kid out of Illinois whose name escapes me at halfback as well. So, the thing about it is, they've got time to do this. I think this is Kirk and the staff kind of just relying on the likelihood of players leaving. Like, Kirk is not one to ask guys to leave. I mean, in general, he's not going to kick guys off scholarships. And I know there's guys around the country who are happy to do that. That's not Kirk's style. So I think this is the staff's way of saying, hey, this is just the nature of the game now. Guys will leave, but we cannot say no to people with the production of Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson and, Luke Lachey. Some people I saw on social media, we don't want Quinn back. Why are we getting Quinn Schulte back? He's a multi-year starter at safety.
Why? Don't want him back. He's a really good player.
They want the next guy. There was that highlight play from Cohen Intringer where he missed the tackle in the Big Ten championship game and then ran 90 yards the other way. And so they want Cohen. They believe that means Cohen Intringer is the best safety. So play him. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Like, it was a great effort play, but obviously there's a reason why Quinn Schulte has been successful. And I get it. He doesn't look the part. He's probably not going to be an NFL starter someday, but no, a lot of respect from his teammates, and very smart young man. Has been very productive. He's hardly been noticed out there, which is probably a good thing when you're talking about the position that he plays. So to get those guys back. And then how about the guy we haven't brought up? Sebastian Castro's coming back. I did not think that was going to happen. I just thought it was going to be hard for him to improve his stock. Apparently he thinks he can improve it a lot. I think the comment was made here less than a month ago when Sebastian was asked about prospects in the NFL draft. He said, hey, I'm basically a late round guy. People didn't know who I was a year ago. And I want to come back and, vault up the ladder. Maybe he'll do that. I think size-wise, he's got some disadvantages at 5'11". He's not the biggest. But, boy, the guy can lay a hit. And it's going to be interesting to see how now that they have him back, the battle, I think the position battle at cash and at safety in 2025 is going to be fascinating because they have so many young guys. With Schulte and Sebastian Castro, so many young guys behind that core, and Xavier Wampa behind that core. It's like Cohen Intringer, or is John Nestor a corner? They signed Rashad Godfrey this year, who I think could be a potential cash guy. Khalil Tate's a guy that I know they were excited about in the 4.25 last cycle. So lots of cool storylines, but this just this takes a lot of pressure off of portal recruiting right now.
Did Xavier Wampa show the kind of promise that he's supposed to? Did he deliver and progress as a first-year player for you?
Well, keep in mind, this is his second year. This was his
Second
second
year.
year.
Okay.
So, again, didn't notice him a whole lot. I mean, there were not very many flaws as a whole for this defense. I think a lot of people thought that Xavier would be, laying huge hits and creating tons of turnovers. We didn't see that out of Xavier Wampa. I don't remember a bunch of plays where he got beat. I do think, and I'm no defensive coordinator, I do think the Phil Parker style, it seems like it creates more turnovers for the corners and the linebackers and the D linemen than it does for safeties. Typically, at least that's history. If you look at Kayvon Merriweather, is another guy that people were raving about his athleticism, and he had a good career here, but never was this tremendous ball hawk type of guy, as opposed to in the Norm Parker era, Brett Greenwood, Tyler Sash, those guys put together incredible seasons led by turnovers. So, maybe that's just a theory. I wouldn't be shocked. I made this comment when Sebastian announced he's coming back. Maybe Xavier Wampa's a candidate to move down to cash once Sebastian leaves. Maybe just because of his athleticism, his size. Now, maybe not, but I thought that would have been a possibility had Sebastian left. But they don't have to deal with that right now. I'm sure Cohen Tringer, I know people are excited about him because of like we said, the big play in the Big Ten championship game, and they got some other younger guys, but they'll have to wait.
Have any of these players, when they've made these announcements that they're sticking around, said anything that's caught your ear out of the ordinary besides just the typical complimentary statements? Because this is quite a few guys that are opting to come back that have NFL futures.
No. First of all, the universities are teaming up with these kids to make these announcements. And so basically the university is posting this information for them with like one-liners like I'm back or not done yet or whatever. So we're not really getting statements. The only statement we've really gotten is from Cooper DeJean, who declared for the NFL draft. I will say this. People need to recognize something very plain as day. All right. The Iowa collective, whether you like NIL or not, the Iowa collective has had a big part in bringing these guys back. So I can say with a fair amount of confidence, if it weren't for the efforts of the Swarm and NIL and Brad Heinrichs, who's the CEO of the Swarm, and all the people who have donated, are members of the Swarm community. Specifically, though, I think it is the bigger name donors that funnel money there that can, these guys are all getting money each and every year. We've talked about that initiative, but now here, opportunities to bring guys back for extra years. A big part of that is funding from NIL, based on what I've been told. So I'm not telling people to sign up and be members or give large sums of money, but there's a good chance that if the Swarm wasn't there, I don't know how many guys have they got back? 5 so far, 6, counting right. They may get half of those or less if it weren't for the Swarm, and that's okay. I mean, let the kids like Quinn Schulte. I don't know, I can't say what he's making as a super senior here, and I know a lot of Iowa fans kind of have mixed feelings about a young kid who probably doesn't have NFL aspirations, but I guarantee you Kirk and Phil value his coming back, and it's worth the NIL punch, if you will, to be able to get him to come back. He's been described as a coach on the field in that defensive backfield. So it is interesting that there haven't been a lot of statements, quote unquote, but that might be part of the reason.
There are several sources that have come out since the end of the season or the transfer portal, the latest window, about $1.5 million to $2 million per year being the going rate for a top level quarterback in the portal. So you haven't come across, with all your sources there at Iowa, just not that I want you to throw out numbers just sporadically that don't mean anything, just as a guess, but we don't have a real good feel for what these numbers could be.
I can tell you that these guys who are coming back are getting substantial NIL dollars. I mean, it's substantial. I can't be specific, and I have not been given specific numbers on each guy, but been given kind of a range, and I can't really relay that range, but I'm just telling you it is substantial. So, and I think some people don't realize how much money there is available. But at the same time, Brad Heinrichs and the Swarm would say, you don't realize how much money there is all around the country with these NIL initiatives. We need more. We need more money. We need more donations. We need more signups. So all that can be true at the same time. But, some of these, here's the other problem. And I made the comment, I think it was yesterday. This is something I can tell you is happening. And it's not just at Iowa. A lot of these players, whether they're upperclassmen or underclassmen, especially once they get into a position of leverage where they're playing, these kids have got NIL agents. And in some cases, these agents, first of all, they're businessmen, right? And they're negotiators. So with the era of the transfer portal, a lot of these agents are making attempts to pressure either the institution or specifically the NIL initiative, and using the leverage that is that player's playing time to get more money. In layman's terms, you could have a situation, I'm not saying this is specific with anybody at Iowa, but there are situations going on around the country where an agent goes to the school's collective leader or the school's head coach and says, look, such and such a school is offering us $400,000 for our kid here to transfer. What can you do? And basically these collectives / administrations, really the coaching staff and the administrations are not supposed to be involved with this, but basically the other side of it, the institution side of it, the NIL side of it, is having to either A, call the bluff, or B, match the dough. So that's a whole new, it's a weird situation, but that is where we're at, Mark. I mean, people need to realize that is where we're at. And it's happening. It's not just happening with the big names. It's happening with a lot of people. And again, I'm not talking about anybody specifically at Iowa, but just in general, all these players in college football, almost all of them, have agents, and those agents are out to make their clients money and make themselves money. So they're going to leverage people, and there's a lot of tampering going on. And if you consider that tampering, which it is, too bad. That's what's happening.
Speaking of business, folks, we can certainly benefit your business. We can partner together if you would like to sponsor here at the Voice of College Football on the Iowa show in particular, but any of the shows, but in particular, of course, our Hawkeyes live show each and every Tuesday. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Yeah, it's a strange world, and it has to be reined in, and there have to be guardrails, and there have to be guidelines, because much of what you just laid out is similar to what happens in the NFL, but all of it's legitimate, and that it's happening within a structure, and that the money offers on the other side are legitimate. Nobody's fraudulent in a fraudulent way throwing out dollar figures to free agents or anything. It's all real money, and it's all on the up and up. Not saying that there aren't less than scrupulous things that go on in the NFL, but in terms of the business, it's all structured, and this is just lost in the middle of amateurism and professionalism. And so all these kind of incendiary, not such scrupulous type behavior, it's just, I don't like it. Don't like it.
Well, I can tell you this will make Iowa fans happy. There are examples of Iowa players, and again, I won't be specific, but Iowa players who have been poached, who are being poached, right? And I don't have any examples of any right now, but I can tell you a couple from the past. We won't get into specifics, but people who have literally had offers from Power 5 schools in other parts of the country that said, come here and this is what we'll give you. So that's actually happening. I want to make clear, it's not just agents trying to leverage. There's actually money being offered by these other institutions and their initiatives to get players to come in as in the transfer portal. And that's why you see so many guys. These guys, certain these players out there, Mark, what percentage of these players do you think would still be entering the transfer portal if there was no tampering whatsoever? How much would that kill the numbers down, do you think?
Oh, I think it would kill the numbers by 50 to 70%. That's just a guess.
Yeah, I agree. At least 50. I was going to say at least 50%, in my opinion. And we're just guessing there. But I think that's how substantial it is. I mentioned an athlete that I know very well who just transferred from a Power 5 school. And I mean, this young man, good player, wasn't playing a lot, got some snaps throughout the year, was playing for a Power 5 school this year, enters the portal. And before the window announced he's entering the portal, before the window is even open, he's getting calls from head coaches of G5 programs. I mean, it's like, and so some of these guys aren't even trying to hide it or be secretive or find a loophole. They're just doing it. They did this thing. Hey, who's gonna stop us? And nobody stopped.
Yeah, and much like politics in the real world in this country, I do believe that there would be a certain portion of those coaches who would rather not do that, but they know this is what's going on. So I have to join the competition and I have to operate like this as well, or I'm going to be thrown to the wayside and I'm not going to be able to improve my roster and I'm not going to be able to compete. So I got to join the fray and I've got to be able to operate in the same way. Is there another collective for Iowa, or is the Swarm it, or are there other collectives that are major components of this?
There's an Iowa City NIL collective that I don't even know if it's still, when this whole era first started up, that was announced that it was being formed, and I don't think it's anything, really. I don't think it's doing anything. It may not even be together anymore. I know, like, the Hawkeye wrestling program has its own collective. The Swarm is just part of funding for NIL cause with Iowa basketball, which is men's and women's, and then football. So, yeah, the Swarm is pretty much as it relates to collective interests in NIL help for those three major sports.
One of the best running backs in the country, Quinshawn Judkins, just left Ole Miss a few days ago. And on the surface, there doesn't appear to be a reason why he would be leaving a situation where he's got an excellent coach as an offensive coordinator, a guy that is getting him the football, featuring him for the NFL. He's playing with a team that's loading up on transfer additions that is projected to be a top 5 to 10 team in the country next year. So on the surface, now some of these, there are cases where there are relationships that have gone sour between coach and player, or just doesn't like the situation, or of course is getting buried on the depth chart, but that's certainly not the case here. We're talking about one of the best backs in the nation, but boom, voila, shows up at Ohio State. So he's committed and signed. It's got to be an NIL deal situation.
I thought I saw something about Ole Miss asking him to leave. Am I wrong? Not right on that?
Really?
What is
that?
This
would be a
again?
Shock to me.
What was his name?
Quinshawn Judkins.
How do you spell that?
Quinshon, Quinshawn Judkins, Judkins. Where Ole Miss
I'll have
to leave.
I thought I saw something about that, but
maybe while you're investigating that, possibly 5 scholarships over the limit, and it's not Kirk's style to ask anyone to leave. Like, Kirk would not be asking a quarterback who just threw 25 or 26 touchdowns to leave his program. They are going to have those conversations probably after spring practice to at least be honest with some players to try to nudge them out the door.
Well, yeah, if they don't do it, I mean, when does the portal window close? This portal.
So it's just closed. It has
just
closed
today.
I believe today or yesterday.
Okay.
It just closed, but there are still players in the portal who have yet to decide. Right. But it's closed. And there are even some loopholes there. So we may hear of a few other guys jumping in because there are a few loopholes there. And then we'll have another one right after spring practice.
Yeah, I can't find what I was seeing. And that may have just been a weird rumor, but if I see it, I'll send it to you later. But I did think that was odd when I saw it. I thought there's got to be something more going on besides just. So, I mean, is that basically I mean, you're an Ohio State guy, Mark. Is that basically you admitting Ohio State is tampering?
Well, it happened awfully quick. So I'm not either accusing or defending one or the other. It wasn't like a Riley Leonard to Notre Dame situation where even before the transfer portal opened, that it was widely reported Riley Leonard is going to Notre Dame. Well, the portal hasn't even opened yet. It wasn't quite that bad, but it was rather quick. Now, he did visit campus before the commitment and the signing was announced.
And when Riley Leonard, I thought if you go to Duke, you're supposed to be the epitome of ethics and morality.
No, you're supposed to be smart.
Oh, okay.
You're intelligent. That
Gotcha.
doesn't mean those other things go along with that.
Yeah.
And I'm not picking on Riley Leonard, but that's exactly the way it played out. Now, the Quinshon Judkins, he just announced this 4 or 5 days ago because I remember when it happened. And I was doing a live stream about whatever the big, probably the playoff, obviously, or the championship game. And then that news broke. And no. Anyway, I'm getting my timeline confused because that was probably when the news broke, yes, that he had signed with Ohio State. So several days before, when he announced he was in the portal, there were people immediately saying he's going to Ohio State. He's going to Ohio State. So it was out there somewhere. All right. So we've got Erica here. Thank you so much for the contribution. Erica, I've heard a rumor that Copeland is also gone. Have you heard anything about that?
That's a rumor out there. And I think I mentioned this on the channel here in the last 2 weeks. I just made the comment that based on what I've been told, if there's any other coaching changes that are going to be made, it's probably going to start there. I know somebody started this rumor online somewhere this afternoon because I had somebody text me about it and say, hey, here's a screenshot of this rumor. What do you make of it? And I'm like, well, the individual that wrote it is someone that I don't necessarily doubt, but I also can't get behind because I have not heard that specifically. But I can just tell you that Copeland, if there's one guy that's probably going to get let go, I know some people want George Barnett to be let go. Probably not going to happen, but Kelton Copeland's been here since 2017, and this wide receiver room has taken a dump almost every single year. And I like Kelton Copeland. He's a nice guy, probably a good coach. Maybe. But I mean, the wide receiver room has not been good. So would I be upset if Copeland gets asked to leave? No, he's made a lot of money here. He'll probably go somewhere else. I saw, I think it was the same message board, that screenshot that was sent to me, a rumor that he may end up at North Dakota State. Again, I don't know if there's any legs to that. Tim Polasek just got hired as a head coach there, so he knows Kelton. But all these rumors and whatnot going on, Mark, I think if the only way that this happens, and I say this, the only way that this works is if they can bring in somebody who's a substantial upgrade at quarterback. And I'm not talking about Cade McNamara, but I think you're going to be bringing in multiple offensive minds. Presumably, if you get rid of Kelton Copeland, you're going to be bringing in a new wide receivers coach, a new quarterbacks coach, and a new coordinator. Now, maybe that new quarterbacks coach ends up being John Budmeyer. I don't want it to be. I think a lot of people would share that feeling that they don't want it to be John Budmeyer, but that's going to happen. So what does that new coordinator plus that new receivers coach and the new quarterbacks coach, maybe that's just 2 guys or 3 guys, do they really want to work with the quarterback room as is? Iowa, again, that rumor a week ago that I did not start and never was able to confirm, but it was out there for about 24 hours that Ty Thompson was taking a visit to Iowa City. The same day he was supposed to be on campus, he commits to Tulane. So, if that's true or not, if that was true or not, if it is true, there's an indication that Iowa is trying to upgrade the quarterback room, which would also be an indication to me that whoever they're bringing in wants to upgrade the quarterback room, because right now they don't have a coordinator. I mean, they're doing, if you're talking about going to the portal quarterback and trying to upgrade personnel or hire staff, like if they let Kelton Copeland go, the new coordinator has to have a part, I think, in the hiring of the next wide receivers coach. And maybe the next coordinator has a wide receivers coach that he wants to bring with him. So a lot of unanswered questions. But like I said, I think based on what I've been told, we're going to get some clarity on this soon. So hopefully in a week from now, we'll have some clarity.
I was a little amused when you brought up North Dakota State, because it seems like anytime there's any kind of speculation about coaching staff transitions or candidates or anything, North Dakota State seems to be in the mix.
Well, I can tell you this, Mark. North Dakota State's been a power. Now, South Dakota State's been, you could argue, a better program over the last 2 years. Am I right in saying South Dakota State has not lost a game since they lost in Kinnick beginning of last year?
You got me.
Okay.
I have no idea.
They went undefeated this year and won the Natty, and of course ran the table after losing in Iowa City the year before that. So, so do you have any predictions, Mark? We've all talked about my predictions and my thoughts. Do you have a prediction on the next offensive coordinator?
Oh, the offensive coordinator. I hate to be so bland and predictable, but I'm thinking Paul Chryst. I haven't given it much thought, though, but I think that he fits in so many ways of what Kirk would be comfortable with, both on the field and off the field.
Yeah. I mean, I know that people won't like that. A lot of people won't like that prediction, but it's the most reasonable rumor, or most reasonable proposition at this point of people that named candidates that are out there. So, like I said, the longer the time goes by, the more I think, hey, there's a chance that Kirk goes a different direction. And like I said, Kirk was supposed to visit a different unnamed candidate last week. So I have not heard since then if that trip occurred. I'm assuming it did. But that person was not named Paul Chryst, and that person was not named Joe Philbin. And that person was not named Andy Ludwig. So, but I think the more time that passes by is a better chance that Kirk doesn't go with Paul Chryst. But he's absolutely a candidate. We know that.
I think that the dynamic is interesting when you bring in a successful head coach who actually during his stay at Wisconsin was more successful than Kirk. And you bring him in and he is working under, this is a guy he's been around the block and he's coached at 2 major schools. I'm not saying that there's an ego problem there. I don't know, but I just have always found that to be a curious dynamic when you take a head coach who's been successful, pretty much coached at the highest level, and then he is now subservient to, in this case, one of his former rivals.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, as a head coach, you can, is Kirk Ferentz some avid recruiter? I don't think he's probably ever been known to be some incredibly efficient recruiter or a guy who's passionate about going out and traveling and recruiting. You can survive as a head coach, especially now, I think with NIL, depending on the program you're at, without your head coach being a sharp recruiter. But if you're going to be a coordinator, I think you better be able to recruit. And so that's been a question mark about Paul Chryst, is where is he at this stage in his career as it relates to going out and recruiting. He understands quarterback play, understands the passing game, has had really good run games at Wisconsin, had success at Pitt, but that's a question I just can't answer.
And when Paul Chryst was let go at Wisconsin, from some reliable sources, that was one of the main issues, that there was a lot of dissatisfaction about his recruiting efforts, regardless of what the rankings said and all of that, that he had kind of checked out in a number of ways, similar to Scott Frost at Nebraska. Just stories of, and again, beyond the rankings, just stories of just bizarre behavior. I'm not talking about doing anything wrong. I'm talking about like not showing up, not calling back, not just being in the moment and being responsible. Yes.
I don't remember those. I remember the Scott Frost ones. The Scott Frost ones were more like the guy's drunk, he's cussing out my son, like that kind of stuff.
Yes, that kind of stuff. Paul Christ, more like, I wish I could remember the one. When I say story, I'm not talking about a detailed story, but one indictment of his irresponsibility or his just kind of letting things go.
Yeah, well, that would be a red flag if there's truth to that. That we've had, I mean, over the last 2 weeks, we've had so much as it relates to personnel news, and a lot of, obviously, most of it we've already covered with guys coming back. The OC talk has kind of become taking a back seat, but it needs to be priority number one now. I mean, if it wasn't priority number one a week ago, it has to be now, because they're basically done as far as bringing guys back. Like Eric All is not coming back. All right. He hasn't made an announcement. He's not coming back. Logan Lee is not coming back. He'd be the only other guy that I'm aware of that would have eligibility if he wanted. So, I mean, that's got to be the focus. And again, if you're going to go get a quarterback or upgrade anywhere else, it's going to involve some, like you said, candid conversations, and you're not going to have those without the leader on offense, I wouldn't think.
The comment made here by South Bend Hawkeye is an interesting one, in that Kirk's successful, but he is successful in a way that says, I've built a system and I'm looking for pieces and parts to fit in the system, not I'm looking to reinvent myself, reinvent what we do to correct things. So I'm going to bring in somebody who's going to make it a little uncomfortable for me, going to stretch me, going to challenge me. And that's how we're going to get better.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. Not at age, what is Kirk, 65, 64? That's not happening. That probably wasn't happening 10 years ago when he was 54. But it's not happening now. Now, could he hire somebody that has, some serious differences in philosophy? Yes, but that doesn't mean he's going to come in and exert his style and his playbook on Kirk so as much as maybe coming to a compromise. And that might be the best case scenario for Iowa fans, that you can get somebody, Ryan Grubb is the name that people have always thrown out there, but someone like that who, runs a different system where he's currently at Washington, but it can come in and is just a good enough offensive mind that he can work within the confines of what Kirk wants and still be incredibly efficient. And that is possible to do. We saw Paul Christ do it with Wisconsin at times. We saw Paul Christ do it at Oregon State. Now, granted, Oregon State, that was a long time ago, and college football has changed, but it is possible to be a lot better with the confines or within the confines of what Kirk Ferentz wants as it relates to what he calls complementary football.
And when we talk about,
apparently he's 68 years old, not 64. Michael corrected me.
68. Yeah. He's looking good for 68. Yes. Doing extremely well. So at least when I talk about progressing as an offense, getting better, reinventing it to a certain extent, I think a lot of people take that as Iowa's issues on offense are simply spread people out, get more wide receivers on the field, and throw the ball. I don't see it that way. I do not see it. We saw a team win the national championship last night that's not throwing the ball many more times than Iowa is.
Right. Now, the recruiting advantages at Michigan are substantial. They are substantial.
They have better personnel through high school recruiting. They have been more aggressive in the transfer portal, and they also must be developing these players better on the offensive side.
Oh, I have no doubt about that, but I'm just saying those recruiting wins that they've had, they've been able to some of that is in part just due to the advantages that is Michigan. Or,
Sure.
you know what I'm
They
saying?
will always recruit better than Iowa.
Exactly. So it's like, if you're not going to be able to hit that level of recruiting, is it then still possible to expect an offense that stylistically looks like what we saw last night? I don't know. Can you get guys developed to that point? What are the ceilings on some of these offensive players? I don't have any doubt that they can recruit better and develop better. There's no question about that. But I think there is a ceiling on that when you play this brand of football. I'm not
There
saying it's
are
gimmicky.
there are 3 schools in the Big Ten. And now that we've had a national championship game in 2023, we might as well include the other 4 that are coming. Might as well say they're officially part of the Big Ten in a football way. But certainly Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, they recruit far better than Iowa on the defensive side of the ball. Do they produce better defenses? No.
Right. And that's the incredible part of this is they don't recruit incredibly well on defense, and yet they are elite on defense. So that tells you it is possible. I think Phil Parker is one of a kind.
I would like for us during this long off season at some point, I would love to get your perspective on past classes and, who's broken through to become a better player than expected, who the busts have been, but also to weigh the offense versus defensive talent. I doubt if it's that disparate
It's not.
Saying, oh, well, the top 6 or 7 players every year or 6 out of 8 or are defensive players. So of course the defense is going to be better.
Perfect example of that is they've had several 4-star quarterbacks in recent time. Several. Spencer Petras was at one time a low 4-star. Carson May, 4-star. Marco Lainez, 3/4-star. James Reesar, 4-star. And maybe he'll turn into a great player. But they recruit okay at quarterback from a rankings standpoint. But either they're falling for the same tricks that the recruiting people are, or they're just not developing these guys. Alex Padilla was actually higher rated kid than I thought coming out of high school. I always bring up the Georgia offer. He went down to SMU, didn't play this year, but he was at Iowa a long time, never broke through, never seemed to really improve.
You just named 6 or 7 quarterbacks and none of them turned out and they were all 4 stars. That's not them missing on 6 or 7 4 stars in terms of talent evaluation.
I agree. Yeah. So what does that mean then? What does that mean? To me, it just means you have a shockingly stark issue with quarterback development. I don't know what else it comes down to. You have some of these quarterbacks are all being trained privately. Like Spencer Petras had his well-known coach, Tony Rassiopi out east. I mean, he's a guy who works with Tim Boyle and a lot of big-time quarterbacks. I never saw substantial improvement from Spencer Petras as it relates to playing quarterback at Iowa. I just never saw it. I not in any necessary. Going from 2020 where I'm thinking back to his first game as a starter against Purdue and his airmailing passes, and he basically the same quarterback he was in 2020 as he was in 2022. And I could argue, Deacon Hill had some of the same issues this year, and he just got here. But it's just odd how you continue to have the same looking. How do I put this? The same visual at quarterback. Basically the same pieces that make up your quarterback room, and yet it's different classes, different kids from different parts of the country, and they all kind of fit the same mold. Having maybe they have a big arm, they're immobile. So I think there is something to be said for recruiting and all this, but whoever they bring in has to be able to start making these kids better on the field. And part of that has to be scheme and play calling because, perfect example, wide receiver. We had this conversation before wide receiver, guys they don't seem to improve at Iowa, but then you have examples like Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy that go elsewhere and have exceptional years. Now, Tyrone Tracy changed positions, but nevertheless, I mean, still success stories that were failed to transpire at Iowa.
I would have a good understanding of who I'm hiring as offensive coordinator and whether they have a strong background as a quarterback developer, have the conversation with them to understand whether they believe that to be part of the role and want that and desire that, or I'm going out and getting the best quarterback developer to be strictly a quarterback coach, and that's all he's going to do, and work with the offensive coordinator, but be a quarterback coach. This would be near the top of my to-do list if I was Kirk Ferentz, would be scouring the nation for a top-level quarterback coach.
Well, that was what we said 2 years ago. And back was up against the wall 2 years ago because Brian was already feeling the heat. How logical would it have been for them to bring in a qualified quarterbacks coach that could have even coordinated a passing game, and Brian could have retained the title? And who's to say this whole thing wouldn't have went differently? And I was an advocate for that. I was not trying to get Brian fired. I was like, hey, bring in somebody who can coach that position. I don't expect Brian to know how to coach it. I mean, you'd hope that your OC knows something about the passing game, and Kirk Ferentz chose to double down.
These kind of conversations make me wish that I could take part in some of these news conferences.
I'd love for you to make. I mean,
I have great respect for the man. I think he's an exceptional head coach, and based on everything I know from you and just prior to our conversations and our relationship, of course, what I know about Kirk Ferentz for all the time I've been watching college football and his stay at Iowa going back to 1999, there was so much good to say about the guy, but my goodness, he just allowed his team to get shut out 3 times this year. I doubt if anybody in college football got shut out 3 times. I don't know who else that would be. I can't think of them.
By the way, the Iowa defense performed better against Michigan's offense than Washington did. Is that fair?
Oh, yes. You know what? I was preparing for the Michigan-Washington game and the Michigan-Alabama game prior to that by basically looking at each component, rushing offense versus rushing defense and so forth from both teams. And it always hit me in reviewing the Big Ten championship game that the Iowa defense performed better against Michigan than anybody else. Forget what the point total was on the scoreboard. They held J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy threw the ball fairly well in that game. It was just he completed a pass. The guy got dropped right there, wrapped up with a tackle, or they're defending the pass. He hit like 22 of 30, but for 147 yards. Like they limited that. And 1.5 or 6 yards per carry. Nobody else did that. Ohio State had an exceptional defense. So did Penn State. They didn't do that.
Here's what's crazy about that too, Mark, is they did that against Michigan in the Big Ten title game without Cooper DeJean.
Yeah. Yes. In the passing game. Exactly.
That's pretty exceptional. And I mean, I remember saying this to you late in the season. Hey, if I was going to have a chance in the Big Ten championship game, Cooper DeJean needs to play, especially if I kind of wanted to see Ohio State because I thought, hey, let's get this Cooper DeJean, Marvin Harrison Jr. matchup, and maybe he creates a big play or two and you have a shot, especially special teams wise. As we saw in the Big Ten title game, you just the offense can do absolutely nothing. And so,
I wonder what Phil Parker would do with, of course, I'm going to go to Ohio State, but I could go to a number of other teams, Georgia, etc. That type of talent. I wonder how much that would matter. You can only be so good on either side of the ball. The stats can only be so good, but.
Well, remember what Kirk said here a few weeks ago when he was asked about leeway for the new OC and rope and all that malarkey. He said, basically, in so many words, he made the comment that I feel that the best way to win games here is the way we're winning games. And so they're not going to go open it up. They're not going to do. That's what he believes. Now, you put him in a different position. Had he taken the USC job, I think when was it that USC wanted to hire him? At some point, USC was in talks to hire him, or talks to hire Hayden Fry at one point, I believe, as well. But he goes somewhere else. Maybe he would have been known differently. It's hard to imagine that, given his conservative nature and reputation. But I can understand where he's coming from with that line of reasoning. But I can also understand the frustration because I have it.
Yeah, it certainly produced successful seasons and win totals. So his defense is understandable, but it also produces the 3 games that they had against the 3 best teams that they played.
Right. Yeah, 92-0, Mark.
And those 3 teams aren't shutting out the worst teams on their schedules.
Right.
Penn State's not shutting out Indiana or Northwestern. Well, Northwestern's a bad.
I'm guessing
they had a really good team this year.
I'm guessing Tennessee didn't shut out anybody either.
No.
Like, that was a good defense. It was not a great defense. Like, it was we looked up the numbers. That was a good defense.
Yeah.
It wasn't great. The fact that Iowa couldn't do a darn thing in that game is just pathetic. It really is. It's pathetic.
And they were missing their best pass rusher and 3 defensive backs.
And again, I would argue the defense played great. I thought early on they gave up some ground to the 5-star quarterback. He looked really good for a time, but they figured it out. There's just no room for error. If they don't play and they played almost you mentioned it. They played almost a perfect game against Michigan, with the exception being a Nick Jackson interception that was dropped. They basically played a perfect game. If you add that interception, might have ended up being a pick 6. Is it 26-7? I don't know, but like, it's just no margin for error when you play this brand with this bad of an offense.
They gave up 2 touchdowns, correct? And one was preceded by the long punt return that was 87 yards. And then the other was preceded by the blindsided fumble / incomplete pass, whatever you want to call that they got kind of ripped off on, even though I thought it was, in a football sense, the correct call. It should not have been reversed. And Michigan had a short field, 5-6 yards to score touchdowns. Yes.
Yeah, I think, again, scores can be so deceiving when you're talking about Iowa football in so many ways. It can be so deceiving, especially with the Iowa D. And remember with this Ohio State game in 2022, we had the same exact conversation because of how well Iowa played in that game defensively, but the offense just continued to put the defense in awful positions, down after down, drive after drive. It's just incredible. You'll have to excuse this loud noise in the back. I don't know if you can hear this. This is we got some snow people. We got a lot of snow here in Iowa, Mark.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Got a lot of snow, so we got some crews right outside my office window here. So
it might be blasting through our direction here. That's how it usually works. We'll see.
Sounds like we're going to get hit again on Friday into Saturday. So we got about, I think Ames, we had about 8 inches today, maybe a little less.
Oh,
but substantial. And then the wind's picking up this evening. So not a good day to travel.
Yeah. It's a little windy here, but there is no snow on the ground. It's just wet. All right, folks, you see it there on the screen. What we're looking at here is if you've got a business or in contact with a business that would like to partner with us here at the Voice of College Football, and specifically for this show, Hawkeyes Live, please hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Or if you've got a personal brand, podcast, platform, something that you would like to promote, certainly that can be accommodated as well. And there's a lot of ways that we can help you out that aren't necessarily obvious or evident here. So again, I can be reached at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. You can also listen to this podcast and others by going to From the Hawkeye of the Storm audio on any of the major audio platforms.
I think this network, and I try not to do this very often, but I think the lineup of audio podcasts that we have over at the podcast platforms, whether it be Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, whatever, is the best out there. I don't know that there's any other Hawkeye and maybe there is that somebody disagrees with this on, but I don't know there's any other Iowa platform that's providing this extensive as it relates to podcast coverage, post-game coverage for men's and women's basketball. We've got former Hawkeye coach Gary Close on for men's basketball. We've got former Iowa offensive coordinator Don Patterson on for all the football games. We're going 3-4 hours in some cases. You and I do weekly podcasts. I have a twice-a-month podcast. We do live shows with people like Brad Heinrichs and former Hawkeyes and future Hawkeyes. I mean, that's just my opinion. I'm done self-promoting, but that's just my opinion. People need to give the audio formats a shot because I think it's great.
I have no idea from experience, but I would bet that to be the case. And Hawkeye fans, if you're interested in where Iowa landed in our top 25 that actually makes sense final, then check it out on the main channel here at the Voice of College Football. All right, folks. Appreciate you all being here. Make it on back next Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central, and we will talk more Hawkeye football. In the meantime, Corey with Iowa men's and women's basketball and any football news that pops up from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, thank you as always.
We'll talk to you next week, Mark. Thanks.